This is the Untold Italy Travel Podcast, and you're listening to episode number 227.
Ciao a tutti and benvenuti to Untold Italy, the travel podcast where you go to the towns and villages, mountains and lakes, hills and coastlines of Bella Italia. Each week, your host, Katy Clarke, takes you on a journey in search of magical landscapes, history, culture, wine, gelato, and of course, a whole lot of pasta. If you're dreaming of Italy and planning future adventures there, you've come to the right place.
Ciao, benvenuti. It's Katy here with something a little different because today we're not talking about a place or things to do when you're in Italy, although I highly recommend you try this out. Today we're talking about a sauce, and it's a sauce that's in my top 5 sauces of all time. Do you even think about that stuff? Because I do. And because I love this sauce so much, and it really is very hard to get an excellent and authentic version outside of the region where it is made, then I always try to make a cheeky stop in Liguria to get my pesto fix. Pesto is made elsewhere in Italy, however, the fragrant green basil version comes from the western coastal region of Liguria. Most people know this area for the Cinque Terre, those beautiful villages perched on cliff tops overlooking the Ligurian Sea. But those of us in the know appreciate just how beautiful and interesting the whole of Liguria is and are happy pottering around its picturesque villages and, of course, eating all the pesto. On this episode, I've invited local cook and food writer Enrica Monzani back onto the show to share the delights of magical pesto. Enrica is working with us on our food and wine tours of Liguria, and I just love her passion for her region. So let's jump in. Bentornata, Enrica. Ciao, and welcome back to the Untold Italy podcast.
Ciao. Thank you for having me again.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you back on the show. And I think the last time was over a year ago. And since then, we've actually met in person, which was amazing. And I loved every second of it. How have you been and how's things in Genoa?
Oh, everything is going well here in Genova. It's May here now and it's hot and not that much. And so, we wait for the summertime.
It was a little bit colder when I was there, but we had such a lovely time walking around the beautiful streets of your city, which I really love Genoa because it's a secret city. You can't, if you don't know someone, you might have a little trouble finding some of the amazing spots that Enrica took us to. We're very lucky to have her. So one of my favourites I just mentioned before we came on air was this really beautiful interior design shop, which I loved. But Enrica, obviously, being a cook, was also taking us to some beautiful food shops, and it was Easter too, so it was great.
See, there are shops actually run by families since decades, even centuries, that neither the Genoese knows. So they are really hidden gems, and you need someone who take you there because they are around the corner without shopping windows. You know, for example, the chocolate shop with no shopping windows, you get in and it's a wonderful chocolate shop. You just get there because of the smell of chocolate leading you to the door. So this is something very peculiar of the city.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And that chocolate shop, mamma mia, that was a good one. And because it was Easter, everyone, they were doing all their Easter eggs. So people were coming, and Italians do not do small Easter eggs. I don't know how they make them so big, but they're huge Easter eggs. Okay, so Enrica, before we begin, as it's been a little while and we have lots of new listeners, would you mind letting everyone know a little bit about what you do and about yourself?
I'm a food writer. I recently published a cookbook on Ligurian cuisine because Ligurian cuisine is, let's say, my passion, my field of expertise, my life, my passion. So what I do cooking classes here in Genova for people coming to visit the city. So I share my cuisine with them. And I also lead food tours of the city. So I bring people in the narrow alleys of this strange city and let them discover our street food and our good food, not just street food. and then I organize food experiences in Liguria as the one we are going to organize together. So I let the people discover my region through food.
Well, it's a very exciting way to discover a place. And I have to say, Ligurian cuisine is so delicious. If you haven't tried it, it's very healthy, it's very fresh, and it's quite different to other regions in Italy. And I really encourage you to listen to some other episodes that we've done with Enrica because she's really an expert. And congratulations on the book too. Listeners, Enrica is a wonderful resource if you're interested in cooking regional Italian cuisine, and we are so excited that she designed our sold-out Liguria tour this year where guests are going to become very personal and get very personal with the topic of this week's podcast, which is, of course, pesto. Enrica, can you start things off by explaining what pesto is and a little bit about its history?
Okay, first of all, pesto that we mention is basil pesto, because the first thing you should know, is that pesto means everything that is pounded in a mortar. So pesto means beaten, pounded. So pesto are these sauces that were prepared pounding different ingredients in a mortar. The mortars were the ancient tools of the cooks. They had mortars and knives. They do not have a blender. So there are many pestos around Italy. The one of Liguria is basil pesto, which became so popular around the world in the last 50 years that it became just pesto. When you mention pesto, it is the basil pesto of Liguria. So this is just to give you a brief introduction, because maybe you have heard about tomato pesto or other pistachio pesto, pine nuts pesto. So this is just to say. So we are talking about the Genoese basil pesto. The story of this recipe, I would like to tell you that this is a very ancient recipe dating to Middle Ages, which is partly true, because the pesto we are eating today, so the pesto made with basil, with the pine nuts, with Parmesan cheese, then we will maybe go into the details of the ingredients, is a recipe that developed in the centuries. So the base, the ancestor of pesto, was a sauce made of garlic and oil, which was very common on Middle Ages tables, because garlic has these antiseptical properties. So it was used a lot as to sanitize food mainly, and people use it a lot for seasoning meat, for seasoning fish, for seasoning vegetables. So we had this sauce made of garlic. Then, little by little, on this sauce, which usually was made in the mortar, they started adding fresh herbs, which is a special thing about Liguria. So Liguria is well known by its fresh herbs as the main ingredients of our recipes. So they start adding fresh herbs, but not necessarily basil. So we have old recipes that provides pestos with parsley, with marjoram, with sage, so with different herbs. And then someone decided just to put basil in this sauce, and it became so popular. The first written recipes of pesto that we can find in the Italian cookbooks backdate the end of the 1800s. So we can say that it is a relatively new recipe for us and for the Italian cuisine. Then other ingredients of pesto like Parmesan cheese, like cheese and nuts, also then developed in the century, because probably the first kind of nuts that were put in pesto were walnuts. So I'm not saying an heresy that saying that you can do pesto with walnuts as well, because instead of pine nuts, because walnuts probably were the ancestors of pine nuts. And probably we learned to use walnuts and walnut sauce to season pasta from the Arabic countries. The Genoese had a lot of trades with the Arabic countries during Middle Ages. There are recipes of these walnut sauces to season food in Persia and in that region. So probably that was the influence. And then from walnuts, we start changing and adding pine nuts, which has a milder flavor. And also cheeses. Now we use Parmesan cheese. In the past, they used to put in the sauce not only Parmesan cheese, but also lots of pecorino cheese coming from Sardinia, because Sardinia was a colony of the Genoa Maritime Republic. And so all the cheese produced in Sardinia used to be shipped in Genoa, and then from Genoa sold elsewhere in the north of Italy. And so that was the cheese available in town. So they used to put this cheese on the sauce as well. And pecorino has a spicy, salty flavor, so it's very strong. This is why when we do pesto nowadays, we don't use that much pecorino jointly with Parmesan cheese in the sauce because it tends to be overwhelming. And another interesting thing is that in all the recipes we can find, they use on this sauce also the Dutch cheese. You know, the one with the red skin around? That always because of the traits of the Genoese with the Dutches. They had strong relationships. And there was a very big community of Dutches here in Genova. And so that cheese as well was very available and cheap. And so we have recipes with pesto made with Holland cheese. But this is just history. Nowadays, the recipes has been codified. So the one you find in every restaurant, in every cook's home in Genova, in the jars as well, but for the preservatives, has just basil and pine nuts and Parmesan cheese and a hint of pecorino cheese. And of course, extra virgin olive oil, which is the last but not least important ingredients of this recipe.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, it's such a great story. I love all these little influences that have come together to build this amazing sauce. And I have to say, you know, for anyone who hasn't been to this part of the world, when you see the pesto sauce in the shop, it's kind of dark green, or they do something weird to it to make it like fluorescent or but when you see it in where it's from, made fresh, it's so bright green and fresh. It is amazing. And you can smell the basil and you're just like, oh, I need to try that. And you can do that in little shops all around the city. And obviously we'll talk about what we serve it with later. But freshly made pesto is something else. It's just amazing. It's a flavour bomb.
Pesto in jars is something else because they have to put preservatives in them, for sure. Probably also because they use a different kind of basil, because the one we use for making fresh pesto is a tender basil, which is harvested when it is tiny. So the leaves are tiny and tender and bright green. And also they use preservatives like salt. So the pesto you have in jars is far saltier than the one you can have if you make fresh pesto. And then they use ascorbic acid for preserving, which makes the sauce a little bit acid. And our pesto is never acid. It's a completely different sauce. So if you come to Liguria, you will taste the something else. And you will understand why this is one of the most loved sauce in the world.
And when my family comes to Italy, we always try to get to Liguria because everyone loves pesto, and it's just like, it's so zingy and fresh, and it's just, it's an exciting thing to have. And I think we don't get that basil in Australia, that little basil. Well, I haven't seen it anyway. Anyone, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen any of it like that. But also we have to remember that the terrain where it's grown is also very important, isn't it?
For sure. The terrain is very important. It's also important the variety of basil, because there are more than 60 varieties of basil in the world. The one we use is the Genoese basil. This is a variety, so you have to choose the right seeds for this kind of for the basil we use for pesto. And this variety of basil has a mix of essential oils that are special. Any basil has its cocktail of essential oils, let's say. And our has a special mix where the essential oil of mint, or that mint flavor, is not that strong. So this makes the big difference in between the other varieties of basil and ours. So it's a very mild basil by itself, the plant itself. So you should look for that plant if you want to grow it in your garden or on your balcony for some exotic sauce.
I can see the faces at our greengrocers. Have you got Genoese basil? They'll be like, no, sorry, lady, we've just got normal basil. But it's also, isn't it to do with the wind off the sea? There's some special growing techniques.
Definitely, because all the greenhouses and the places where the hills where the basil is grown are clinging on the sea. So most of them has a sea view. And so, of course, the sea breeze comes through the leaves and the minerality of the sea and the humidity of the air. And so the composition of the soil, it really affects. And it is to say that our basil has DOC certification. So just the basil produced in Liguria with certain criteria, with certain means of production, can be considered, no, DOC, sorry, DOP. So really the land is very important for the basil.
And they treat it with love, don't they? They don't just rip it out of the ground. Like, there's actually a very special technique to picking this basil that I've noticed. Is that right?
See, you're right. You're right. The way looking at watching people collecting basil is really fascinating because they have these greenhouses with, how you say, the string of wood, like tiny balconies. How you say that?
It's a plank.
And people floats on this plank and harvest basil by hands. And when they harvest basil, they make bouquet, like a flower bouquet of basil, and they wrap them in paper. So this is amazing how to see these people, how quick they are in picking by hands basil. So this is a very interesting thing to see.
Our guests are going to have a nice time looking at that, aren't they, on our tour? That's included in our tour.
See, because in our tour we are going to visit one of the, I would say, nicest basil farm, because it's just overlooking the sea. So you see these greenhouses and the sea and all the people collecting the basil by hand. It's a very nice experience.
Oh, I'm very jealous I'm not going. I must rectify that situation for next year. All of these things are very fascinating to me. It's just the patience and you have to be quite gentle, and you must be picking a lot of basil. I can imagine if there is being a lot of basil being used in pesto throughout the region, like constantly. It's just the production methods, like they're very manual, but they must be getting a lot of basil together.
See, because we really use a lot of basil for making pesto, but not just in the restaurants, but at home. And then there are the big producers that produce pesto that can be preserved for some days, or the pesto in jars. So for long stocking. So this is a huge production.
And Enrica, how do you make it? I feel like the first pesto recipe I saw, now don't get cross with me, but it said... It basically just said, throw everything into a food processor and switch it on. But I think I know better now.
Okay, the matching of the ingredients is so special that you can also try to do that and you will get a nice sauce. But there are, of course, many tips and tricks for making a better pesto, of course, which are the one I teach when I do cooking classes. So the best way for getting the best result. Of course, when I do cooking classes, I teach people how to do pesto in the mortar, the old way, which is very fascinating because it's a tough work, but at the end you get I would say, the best pesto ever, because working the basil in the mortar made in marble, which is a cold stone, preserve all the essential oils of the basil. So this is really a different way of protecting the essential oils of the sauce. But I have some useful tricks also for those who make it with the blender, as I do usually at home when I prepare it in batches for my family. So I have to confess that this is the common way we do that. Don't laugh at me.
I'm shocked.
No, don't be shocked. I have nice tricks also for this. First thing first, which is in any case you have to do, is to remove very well the leaves from the stem, because basil is not like parsley that you can use also the stems, because basil stems are bitter and watery and they really affect the flavor of your pesto. So remove very well the stems. Just use the leaves, just the leaves. Second thing, basil is very spoiled. So it's a very spoiled leaf. It tends to bruise very easily. And if it bruises, if it oxidizes, the essential oils of the plant oxidizes themselves. So we have to handle it carefully. So try when you wash it to be very gentle. If you use the salad spinner, do not overuse it. Better if you let it dry on a table, on a tea cloth. That's the best way. And also, basil tends to oxidize due to the heat. And when you use the food processor, the blades, when they turn, they generate heat. So a good thing is to keep the temperature of your sauce as low as possible. And there are two tricks. One is putting the blades of the blender and the cup of the blender in the refrigerator or in the freezer before you do the pesto. The second trick is to put the oil that you are going to use in the sauce in the fridge half an hour before. So when you take it out, it's cold. And the cold oil will lower naturally all the temperature of your pesto. This will preserve the essential oils and as a consequence, also the brightness of the sauce. Third trick, wherever you put the ingredients in the blender, I have my sequence. I tell you wherever you put them. Just keep half of the oil aside and add it at the end without the blender. So just pour the extra oil inside the sauce and then stir gently with the spoon so that the oil will not emulsify with the water inside the sauce, and we let the oil time for encapsulating all the essential oils of the basil leaves and of the cheese and of the pine nuts. So the half of the oil has to be added, even if you use the blender, at the end and then stirred with a spoon. I think these are the best tricks I can give you.
Enrica, I know you've put a lot of work and a lot of love into getting those tips, because I can imagine she's a very busy mum and she's got, the family to feed, but I know she doesn't want to give them bad pesto. So that's amazing. I'm sure you tested quite a few things out to get to that end point.
See, quite a bit, many times.
So now tell us, what do you eat with the pesto? I know one of my favourites, but how do you eat the pesto? I mean, personally, by the way you're talking about it, I think I'd just probably like to spoon it and put it in my mouth.
Okay, just spread on a piece of bread. Just make it fresh and have a bruschetta with bread and pesto, and that's it. Then, of course, it was conceived as a sauce for seasoning pasta, and so you season pasta with pesto. My favorite, personally, are traditional lasagnas that are made here in Liguria, in Genoa, and they are called mandilli de sea, which literally means, in dialect, silk handkerchief, because they are sheets of lasagna the size of an handkerchief, so very big. And these lasagnas are boiled one after the other. So you boil this sheet of lasagna, you place it on the plate, you spread some pesto on it, and then you go on adding layers and layers of these very, very thin lasagnas with pesto in the middle. And you put 5, 6 layers of lasagnas, and then you serve it with some extra cheese on top. This is one of the most common ways of having pesto in town. They are lasagnas, but nothing to do with the Italian lasagna you may know, with the bechamel and the ragu and baked in the oven. No, this is something else. But we call them lasagna and we serve them like this. And this is my favorite way of eating pesto. Definitely the best one. The second way of having pesto is with the gnocchi, Italian gnocchi, with potato gnocchi, or better with the Ligurian gnocchi, which are called troffiette, actually. And it's fresh pasta, curly fresh pasta, traditionally made by hand. Nowadays, no, because it would take too much time. And if you go in any restaurant in Liguria, you will find troffie seasoned with pesto. And then there is another traditional way but you can season any kind of dry pasta. The most common pasta or traditional way dry pasta we use are trenette. Cranete are very, very long spaghetti, quite flat, like linguine. And we season this dry pasta with pesto, but we add in the boiling water also vegetables. And this is the proper way of making pasta al pesto, is adding potatoes, diced potatoes, and green beans. So if it is on season, and then you put the vegetables to boil in the pasta 5 minutes before putting the dry pasta in, and then you put the dry pasta, you drain everything together, and then you season pasta and vegetables with pesto. That's the way you should find a very proper pesto in any restaurants you go to, and you should do that at home. So with potato and green beans. And then there is another thing I want to tell you about seasoning pasta with pesto, which is mandatory, is to water down your pesto with the boiling water before you season your pasta. Because pesto, when you make it, it's a thick sauce. Used to be a thick sauce. You have to dilute it with hot water where the pasta is still boiling, because there is some starch inside as well. And then you dilute the sauce and stir very quickly. In this case, yes, you emulsify the oil with the water and you get an extra creaminess. And that is the way you should use pesto. So you get this extra creaminess, and then you season your pasta. Even if you use pesto in jar, always dilute it with the boiling water of your pasta.
That's the top secret, actually. Like, I did learn that from my mother-in-law, and that is a game changer. Pasta makers, it is a real game changer. Use your pasta water.
And if you boil fresh pasta, saves a cup of boiling water always to use if necessary after you have seasoned your pasta, because fresh pasta like troffie, like lasagnas, like whatever, they tend to go on cooking even after you have drained it. They absorb a lot of liquid, so you need extra water to add if needed to keep the creaminess.
I can tell you, when my twins were very young and we had a week in Santa Margherita, Liguria, which is just magical. It was in late September. There was no one there. It was beautiful. And that's all they would eat. I think they were 2 years old, and all they would eat was troffie and pesto. And they were, "Can we have wiggly worms, Mum?" That's what they said to me, because that's what the green worms. Can we have the green worm? And I said, of course. But I haven't tried that lasagna. Sounds amazing. But we haven't actually talked, the basil is so important to this dish, but also it's the olive oil. So because you can't be using the olive oil from the supermarket that you bought 6 months ago. That's not going to work, is it?
Well, extra virgin olive oil lasts for 1 year and a half, so you can use it. The important thing is that you use proper oil, and not because of this is Liguria, but I'm in Liguria and pesto is a Ligurian sauce, but Ligurian extra virgin olive oil is the best one for this sauce because it's a very mild oil. So Ligurian oil is known for its mildness, fruitiness, freshness. It's quite different from the other oils in Italy. It's not too spicy, too bitter. And so it does not overwhelm all the other ingredients. And so this is perfect for seasoning pesto. So if you have to do this not really cheap sauce, invest in a very good extra virgin olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. And that will be a game changer too, for sure.
I just love the attention to detail on this. There's a handful of ingredients, but we're selecting them very carefully. Then we are paying very close attention to the method, from picking the leaf to putting it in the mortar and pestle or the food processor. And I just admire you so much, because you do have that passion and you have just dedicated your life to really understanding what works with this amazing food. Thanks, Enrica. It's amazing.
No, you're welcome. There would be so many other things to tell about pesto. I should write a book about pesto. No, joking. So these are the essentials. So then you can tweak and trick on any ingredients, in different ways to get the best ever experience of your life eating a fresh pesto pasta.
It is so good. I can't stress that enough, everyone. So, and really, I don't need an excuse to go to Liguria, but I think if you really wanted to taste something that's really fresh and different, because, as we talk about a lot on this podcast, if you go to Rome and order pesto, you're probably not going to get the best version of it. But what you do get in Rome is the carbonara and the alla griscia and the cacio e pepe. But if you want to try this really fresh and beautiful sauce, you do need to go to Liguria. And some of you probably have been there to the Cinque Terre, but it's so, so worthwhile going beyond those little villages and exploring some more.
I have to say that Cinque Terre are fantastic, but if your aim is food, Cinque Terre are not the best place for tasting food. This is why we decided to make our tours on the west of Liguria rather than on the east, because Cinque Terre are getting too much touristic, too crowded, and this is difficult to find good traditional restaurants that invest in good quality food and in researches and in looking for ingredients. So if your focus is food, Cinque Terre is not your place. If your focus is the beauty of the villages, hiking for sure on the hills, that's an amazing destination. But Pesto is better in Genoa.
Maybe it's a deliberate strategy to focus everyone on those villages, because there's so many beautiful villages in Liguria. Like, you can just go on a little train ride from Genoa up and down the coast, and you can find so many beautiful little villages there. So that's why we love it. It's kind of a little secret.
Without that mass tourism.
Yeah, I feel like there's going to have to be some intervention there soon. It's getting beyond a bit of a joke, really. But we need to support the people of that region to help them keep the traditions, because it won't be as special if they don't do that.
No, sure.
Okay, so Enrica, how can our listeners explore the origins of pesto in Genoa and Liguria with you? How can they stay in touch with you?
Okay, allora I have a website, a small kitchen in Genoa, which is bilingual, so it's in Italian and in English. And there you can find all my services or what I offer, and including recipes. So there are recipes in English of pesto for sure, and any other traditional Ligurian recipes. And there you can also find my cookbook, Ligurian Cucina, the flavors of Liguria. But you can also find it on Amazon US. So for the US listeners, it's also there. And I'm on Instagram as well. So always as a small kitchen in Genoa. And in YouTube, I have some video recipes if you want to look at them as well. So you can find me also there.
Grazie, Enrica. Thank you so much for joining us on Untold Italy today. And I can't wait to see all the photos and everything from the tour. I'm so excited. And I'm very jealous I'm not going to be there with you.
Me and Livia will do a great job. We will send you pictures.
I'll just have to drool over the photos. Grazie.
Grazie a te, Katy.
Yum, yum, yum. Pesto is so delicious, especially when eaten in Liguria. When we met Enrica last year, we had such a delightful day sampling the local pesto, among other things, as we walked through the old town of the city of Genoa. I was so excited to meet her personally and congratulate her on the publication of her book of recipes and photos in English and Italian. I may have mentioned this before, but it's truly a huge achievement, because book publication is already difficult, but for a woman to do this in Italy in both languages speaks to Enrica's passion, dedication, and focus. I'm so inspired by Enrica and absolutely thrilled that she's helped us create our Untold Italy food and wine tour of Liguria. The first trip is departing in October this year, and again in 2025 in both spring and fall or autumn. Of course, you will meet Enrica and she'll show you how to cook some of the region's famous dishes, but only after you've discovered the local production of basil, the intense and beautiful relationship with olive oil, and the hidden colourful towns that everyone misses when they focus on the Cinque Terre. You'll find links to Enrica's website and where you can purchase her book, The Flavours of Liguria, plus all the details of our food and wine tour of Liguria in the episode show notes at untolditaly.com/227 for episode 227. Grazie mille. Thank you for your ongoing support of Untold Italy. We truly appreciate all of you, our listeners, joining us from all around the world. And we would love it if you help spread the word so we can reach more Italy-loving travelers just like you. And the best way you can do this is by leaving us a 5-star rating or review on your favourite podcast app or forwarding this episode onto a friend who also loves colourful towns, delightful local customs, and the magic of regional Italy. That's all for today. Next week, I'm sharing my must-have experiences when visiting the Renaissance city, the city of Florence. But until then, it's ciao for now.
The Untold Italy podcast is an independent production. Podcast editing, audio production, and website development by Mark Hatter, production assistance and content writing by the other Katy Clarke. Yes, there are 2 of us. For more information about Untold Italy, please visit untolditaly.com.